Basically, the only new principle involved is that instead of power being generated by the relative motion of conductors and fluxes, it's produced by the modial interaction of magneto-reluctance and capacitive directance. The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite, surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing, in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with a panometric fan. The lineup consisted simply of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal vanes, so fitted to the ambifacient lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented. The main winding was of the normal Lotus-O deltoid type placed in panendermic semi-boloid slots of the stator.
Come get your tune up. It's time for your tune up. Your game needs a tune up. Come get your tune up. It's time for your tune up. Your game needs a tune up.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Tabletop Tune-Up. Mark, I gotta give you credit for what is a really awesome beat there. What a great bit of music.
Yeah, that one turned out very fun. And let's just talk about that for just a moment, because we're kind of running to the end of our music. And it's not that there's not more music out there, guys. Like, there's a lot out there. I could do this for days, like Steve Rogers.
Right.
However, my bank account can't, and I'm not going to pay for Suno anymore.
All right. So we're gonna see some old tracks coming back.
Yes, that is correct.
That'll be fun. Look, in fairness, I think this is 46 episodes in at this point, and good heavens, man. We've had unique music for all of those. I think we've got a pretty good library. So I'm excited to see what stuff we pair up with what intro clips. And speaking of intro clips, I don't know where you found that intro clip, but what was that even?
I don't know. I'll have to send you a video of it or something. It's just some guy going on for good, I think 5 or 6 minutes of just absolute gibberish, technical jargon. Technobabble. And It makes no sense.
Do you even know what he was talking about? Like, is he talking about like a vehicle or a piece of machinery, or?
I think he's literally, he's standing in front of him like some sort of big technical device. And he's acting as though he's talking about this device. But I think he's just talking about nonsense.
Wow. Well, we'll never know because we have no idea what that device is.
And the segue here is that's a little bit how I feel about this game we're going to be reviewing today.
Oh my gosh. All right. Yeah, let's get to it. Hey, everybody. So this week we are going to do a review of Traveler. Traveler is a storied game. It has been around for a long time, actually. Here's a little bit of interesting trivia about Traveler. Traveler was released the same year that Star Wars was released. And basically within a couple months, this is 1977. And so if you ever wondered what would be like the perfect thing to help you get your home RPG game turned into a blockbuster RPG industry hit, well, guess what? If you can get George Lucas to release a brand new science fiction epic, like within, a couple months of the release of your game, that's about what it takes. And Traveler benefited greatly from Star Wars.
For some reason in my mind, I always thought it was a Steve Jackson property or something like that.
He was involved with it, I think. I'd have to go back and check, but there's been a GURPS Traveler option for people that are into Steve Jackson's games. We should talk about GURPS one of these days too.
Oh man, let's make a character in GURPS. It'll take us a good couple days.
Oh boy! All right, well we'll have to spend some time with that. But today we're going to talk Traveler. And Traveler has, over the years, since 1977, had a lot of different incarnations. It's had like 5 full versions. Essentially the sort of the godfather of it, the Gary Gygax, if you will, of Traveler is a guy named Mark Miller. Mm-hmm. And I believe Traveler is kind of a UK phenomenon. I think that's where he's from. And he has basically shepherded a lot of the production of this, although over time, rights have gone to different companies. There's been different versions. The current people that are producing the most stuff, and I think have all the copyrights these days, is Mongoose Publishing. And the game that we played, you've probably, if you're a longtime listener to the podcast, you've heard us talking about a Traveler game we were running a little while ago. We wrapped up our first major story arc of that. And that's essentially what's set our expectations for this game, we've been playing that in the Mongoose second edition Traveler. And I think it's been a great experience. But as we do, we're going to talk about the high points, the low points, and any kind of further insights or things that we'd recommend if you want to take this game on. Mark, why don't we start there? What are some of the parts you liked?
Well, there's a few things, and I'll start with the aesthetics. The books are great.
Yeah,
They get you excited to play, and they got everything you want out of a space saga book. It's got these cool ships, all of which you could be, captain of. There's all sorts of, mech things you can get, guns and all sorts of cool stuff. And
so it kind of hits the tropes well with sci-fi.
Yeah, it really does kind of hit those tropes, and it hits them well. And it gets you it draws you in and makes you want to play a game in a very similar way that we talked about how Rifts would draw you in with their really cool presentation. Traveler does a great job of just making this look exciting.
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things any game's going to do, and I think if you really nail this, like maybe somebody will convince me otherwise, but I think the worst you're ever going to do, as a grade is going to be a B. You know what I mean? Like if your game can really inspire imagination, people are really excited, they want to play it because they saw that art, they saw that great writing. Your system could be middling to dreck, and people would still give it a go.
But one thing they do well, I'll say this too, and they know their audience. So they're making artwork that appeals to what people want out of that game. So it's very different than, say, like I could pick up maybe like some like the older versions of Dungeons and Dragons, and I look at the artwork, particularly we'll say Pathfinder, because they get these amazing covers. I like to use Pathfinder because I think their covers are some of the best in the business. Those get you viscerally excited to play that game. Traveler's a little different. You got to be excited about science fiction, and you'll look at that and you'll get excited.
Yeah,
it's not going to appeal to everybody.
Now that's interesting. So we've drawn this distinction before, and I mean, it's not like we're the originators of this, but people have observed the difference between science fiction and science fantasy. And so when you think about, like, say, science fiction, you're thinking about stuff like The Expanse. Science fantasy, the go-to example would be like Star Wars, where it's using space travel and it's using, psionics and interesting mystical powers and stuff like that, but robots and things. But it really is kind of like a fantasy.
This is definitely a little more science fiction in the classic sense, not in the fantasy sense.
Right.
So the artwork is a little bit more crisp. It's a little bit more not illustrative is not the word I'm looking for.
Well, some of it's more like a technical illustration as opposed to like a painting. What I was thinking of.
A technical manual. So it has that kind of aesthetic to it. And that's not good for everybody, but it's good for the audience of this game. So they know their audience.
Yeah. So I think science fiction is kind of a core thing here that and we've said this before, when you're thinking about systems, the system you want for your game is the one that's built around the tropes and the ideas in that setting. And so here in Traveler, you're going to find a lot of focus on technology and engineering and things like that. You're going to be able to basically make any kind of vehicle you want to be in if you want to make them. You can make robots. You can make all kinds of stuff. They've also got psionics. They've got very large universe. There's actually like a Traveler map website that's detailed every system and sector they've come up with and all of the different universal world profiles and all the different details of this thing for like 20 years and however many years it's been, 40 years, I guess. The community is insane. Like they've got so much detail and backstory around all this stuff. So there's a lot of really interesting, fascinating stuff you can do. The kinds of games you can play can vary as well. So just like as in D&D, you could play games that were urban adventures that were focused on intrigues and back alleys. And you could also play exploration adventures on the frontiers, and you could come up with all kinds of different play paradigms. Here, you can play science fiction adventures that are like Star Trek kind of, where you're doing exploration. You could play small groups that have their own little ship that they're trying to keep the mortgage paid and the fuel tanks full, kind of Firefly style. There's all kinds of different choices you have in the science fiction genre you can play with here.
And folks, there's a lot of material out there. There's a lot of books, which which is good. If you, I mean, in a certain sense, it's really good because if you're running games, you want to be able to expand your, your skills as a GM, and you need places to go. And these books will give you a lot of that stuff that you could kind of expand into your repertoire of skills for this game. And some games have great systems, but they just don't have a lot of books to back it up. I mentioned this one because we love this game a lot, was that Prowlers and Paragons, which we really loved. The downside of that game was that there just wasn't a lot of like material for us to draw upon to make adventures.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember you mentioned even with Palladium, for example, you said you didn't find there was enough GM support for that at the time.
No, they put out so many books for players to make characters and stuff. They just simply did not put out enough stuff just for GMs.
Yep.
Like the ratio should be pretty good. They should be a pretty strong ratio one way or the other, in my opinion.
Yeah. And in Traveler, I think what's interesting about this is that the approach where you're kind of engineering everything is a really interesting kind of way to go, because then it kind of doesn't matter if it's players or GMs. They've all kind of got the same rules for how the universe works and stuff like that. Speaking of interesting things you can engineer, you can also engineer your character's origin story to some extent. They've got this really fascinating life path creation thing that I've found has been, I'll say the people I've introduced that to, it's been a very mixed bag, because players these days, I think, really expect to have a lot of authorship control over their character's origin story. And life path creation is essentially, I'm going to roll randomly and we'll see what career I can get. I can try for things, but I might not get there. I might want to have an experience as a naval officer, but maybe I end up in prison or I end up doing something else.
This is probably my first big knock on this game.
Okay.
Is I didn't care for that, that career path thing. And it wasn't too bad for the character I made. He turned out okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw one of our other players roll and every roll got him more frustrated. And he eventually, at the end of the session, it was like a 4-time college dropout. It was just ridiculous. The backstory was just ridiculous. And it was not a character that would inspire any stories. It just didn't turn out very good. And it was just random dice, and it works for some people. And for some people, it just was misery.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting notes on this because it's a very famous part of Traveler's game system. Early editions of it, you can actually die in character creation. It could be the case that you got killed as part of your Navy career, for example. And so that was one of those things that people kind of joked about. It's like, it's the only game you can play where you die in character creation.
That is just horrible.
Well, and also from these frustrations you're talking about, the other thing to say is this is an optional system. So they do have ways of just saying, like, I want to have that kind of background from that kind of homeworld or whatever, and I want to have that kind of career. And then you basically pick those skills and you get started.
That is I'm glad that's optional. In some ways, I wish we'd taken that option.
I think we did eventually, didn't we?
I think we did eventually. I think one of the players was pretty upset about it.
I think when we saw the level of stress it was causing, we decided to take the other route.
Nobody wants to play a character. In your mind, you've got in your mind you're going to build this great, scientist or thinker, and you end up with a college dropout, and you're just like,
what am I even doing here?
What's going on here? What happened? I could have been making it through boot camp, And this isn't a problem with just this game. I mean, this is something we encountered with Palladium when we were, as we talked in our review of the Palladium games. Go back and listen, guys. We had kind of talked about how these random backstory generations can have wildly different experiences between players at the same table, which then could have wildly different, like, party members in the group. Some that are completely more powerful than others. And I can see that being a problem with this character creation method as it's presented.
Well, so I think in the high points, we'd give it a lot of interesting points for, having a really expansive community supporting it. I think we give it points for having a really great product line. I think we give it points for really capturing a lot of the tropes and the kind of the feel of science fiction. For people that didn't know, this is a 2d6 based task resolution system. So typically what's going to happen is you're going to roll 2d6, you're going to add some modifiers for an attribute or a skill or both, and then you'll resolve whatever that is. We didn't, I think, full disclosure, we didn't in our game cover everything in the system. We got through a lot of stuff, but we didn't, for example, do much in the way of space combat, and we didn't do much in the way of psionics. And we actually didn't play in the Third Imperium setting that is kind of the house setting for Traveler. It's a far future, maybe somewhere on the year 5000, something like that. We played instead the 2300 AD game, which is essentially set in the first moments of humanity's steps out into the stars. Anybody who's interested in that, I actually, as a GM, really enjoyed the Project Byron supplement for 2300 AD. But this is a thing that's got some good parts and some bad parts, in the sense that I think it was really, really amazingly well written. It's actually an expansion of an earlier module that comes from earlier editions of the 2300 AD system, because it's not the first time they've done that.
I think they wrote a really good thing, but I don't think they ever ran it.
Well, that's interesting. This is kind of where I think the critical part of my review of that goes, is just, I think it was a very heady kind of 2001 or Star Trek The Motion Picture was kind of how I thought of it, right? There's a lot of really interesting big idea moments, but a lot of times your players are expecting something that's a little more Wrath of Khan. You know what I mean? They're expecting villains.
Hey, GMs out there, you got those big moments, those big type of reveals, and those big heavy moments. Those come on the backbone of a lot of other work that comes before it. You don't just get those for free. You have to earn those with character development. You have to build a bunch of little moments before that. You don't just get that big emotional moment and expect players to fall in line. And I think that's maybe a little bit what this module was missing.
Yeah.
Is a lot of those moments. But we're not reviewing a module, we're reviewing a system. So
yeah,
I do want to talk about another thing I really liked about this game. I liked the chain skills, the tasks.
Oh yeah.
Can you describe those a little bit for the audience?
Yeah. So they have what they call a task chain resolution system. Now this is interesting. So if you're used to playing D&D or a lot of other games, really, they might have like a helping system, right? Where if I'm going to do something, Mark wants to help me, he'll roll a skill or he'll roll something, and then I'll get a little bump or bonus to my task. And then that's kind of where it stops. In Traveler, you can actually chain this through multiple different people, and whether or not they succeed or fail isn't a reflection of whether or not you are going to succeed or fail. What it does is it actually creates a modifier for you. So let's say that Mark and some other player we're all going to try to start a nuclear reactor. And maybe Mark needs to go and make sure that the coolant is activated, and maybe the other guy needs to go and make sure that the fuel rods are being withdrawn, and maybe I need to monitor something at a control station. And so we would all have to do our respective tasks.
And this is, by the way, a classic kind of trope of science fiction. You see this kind of stuff all the time when, Captain Kirk is up on the bridge giving an order for this person so that the other person can do something here. So yeah, this is not an outside the scope of science fiction. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. So essentially what happens is that each person, prior to the person who's going to make the final roll, the roll that determines whether or not the task succeeds or fails, every prior person is basically creating a modifier for the next person's roll. So that third player we were talking about a moment ago, they make their roll, and then if they succeed or fail, that margin gives Mark, let's say, a modifier to whether or not his effort to manage the coolant, let's say, will succeed or fail. And then when Mark rolls that will then modify my final effort to activate the reactor, let's say. Yeah. And so it can create a cascading effect of very difficult rolls or very good or bad. But what's interesting is it's recoverable. So if that first person we talked about, if they had a bad roll, Mark might still be able to pull it out and recover because he's a really good nuclear engineer or something.
Yeah.
So really interesting way to put all that together.
And what's great about this at the table is that everybody's leaning in and really invested in each other's roles, much more so than that solo lockpick role in D&D or something like that nature. Everybody's leaned in, I thought that was a fantastic way they handled it. I would say one thing that we had talked about, and I think you kind of adjusted and tweaked a little bit later in the game, is to be very clear about what you want from a result from that roll. When we first started playing, it was like, what was the DC in
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons terms? What was the difficulty of that roll? It's important, all GMs out there, it is important to let the players know what the difficulty of whatever role you're having them do is, so that they're not just floating out there and you're like having to make a decision of like, I think that made it, or like, because
Yeah.
then it becomes arbitrary that the GM wants this to happen or doesn't want it to happen.
Yeah. In fairness, I'll say this was something that I probably should have been better at when we started the game. And what would tend to happen a lot with me was I'd think, okay, well, I want to see X result. And I would think, okay, that's probably like an average difficulty roll. But then I didn't sort of tell people, okay, that's an average difficulty roll you got to make to be successful. I might have kind of like a sense that like if they fell short, I might give them a little less information, or if they, did a really good high roll, maybe I'd give them a little bit more information. But Mark, you're right. Like the thing you got to do is give people that anchor point that says this is what success looks like.
But that's not a traveler.
That's a me problem though. That's not a, yeah.
That's not a traveler problem, guys. That's just something as GMs we all have to do.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't do all the time either. So just newsflash for everybody out there who's running a game.
Pro tip,
make sure you have those difficulty numbers set so that players know what they're trying to reach. They need to know.
Very good. Okay, Mark, I feel like we've held this off long enough. Give us the bad news. What is it that you found challenging about Traveler?
Okay, so you really like this game. There's no doubt about it. I
net positive. Yeah.
I thought it was there was just a lot of talking, and it felt like there was a lot of techno babble, and also there was so much stuff in those books that it was very difficult to play online.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you had all the books out there and you could kind of like, pass it across the table. This is the ship. I think it would have been a different experience. We play virtually. This game was really tough to play virtually because of some of that. I thought the character creation, I really.
Let me stay with that point just for a moment. It's in a certain sense, it's very information intensive. Is I think a different way of putting your point. It was something where to your point, like we did have a lot of material around. I'd be opening 3 and 4 books every time I'm running the game.
Yes.
And
I had tabs of PDFs open.
Yeah.
And I couldn't keep track of it all. Like the items, like your character would have all these different items on them, and they were on page 343, and then this item was on page 121, and this item was another book on page 210.
Yeah.
Like the stuff was all over the place, and I could not keep track of it. And it was frustrating because of that. Like every time I came to do something, I had to go find that part of the book. Organization is key in this game. I was not organized.
Yeah.
I'm not an organized person by nature. So this was a tough haul for me.
Yeah. I do think that not every group is going to be like that. And we could say, oh, that's the player's fault. That's fine. And that's fine. And so our first rule with any game is like everything depends on your group and whether or not they're into it. We did have players that were into it too.
But there's other games where everything is on your character sheet.
That's true.
Everything you need to know is on one sheet. We were playing Broken Compass, which we'll talk about in the future. Yeah. Everything you need to know about that game is on one sheet. And I love that about it.
Yeah.
I think to me, that is an important aspect of a game, is that I'm not spending time looking through books. Because if I'm looking through books, I'm not paying attention to what the other players are doing. And I had to look through the books way too much in this game.
Yeah. Your point earlier about kind of knowing your audience, I definitely think that Traveler's audience is one that is heavy with the math and engineering crowd. You know what I mean? Like people who look at the science and they look at the astronomy and the physics and the engineering and all those different kinds of disciplines. And these are people that really want to see the detail. They really want to kind of quote unquote get things right. And so I think a lot of the consistency that they want to create in all those books and across all those books. I mean, this is what people talk about when I've seen reviews from players, and when the community has a problem with a book that Mongoose puts out. The problem is, hey, I noticed you published this ship, and when I tried to use the rules to create that same ship to replicate that ship, it didn't come out with the same math, and I didn't, the tonnage was off or something. And you're like, wow, that's a lot of homework.
All right, Cliff Clay, then thank you.
Yeah. So if you don't have a group that's kind of got some of that DNA, some of that, STEM in them, then this might be a little bit of a haul.
And we had somebody in our group that had that DNA. And I got to say, he loved it.
He had a great time.
And he loved this game. He loved everything about it. So this is a me problem when I'm talking about this game.
I want to come back to this other point you made about it being a lot of kind of talking. And I think that's another
that's not a Traveler thing, though.
Okay.
And I don't have a problem with the talking too much.
You think that was more the module?
I think a little bit more the module. I don't want to throw this module under the bus because I'm sure some writer was doing his best. And
I talked to him online, actually, on the Travelers Discord. It seemed like a very wonderful guy. And flattering. I think it's a good module.
And let me tell you, to my point also, Ben, I've ran modules and I've run them to the ground too.
Yeah.
So and it wasn't that you ran to the ground. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that running modules is difficult as it is. And sometimes they don't translate well. Sometimes they do. And sometimes it's the audience. There's so many things that make a game, an adventure work for some people and not for another. But I would say I have one other beef with the game.
Yeah.
But that was my first beef was the fact that I was flipping through books way too much.
Too information heavy. Got it. Okay.
Number two, and this is a problem with a lot of science fiction games. You get into these traps of science fiction. And this is true for TV shows.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. In Star Trek, they teleport down all these things. And one of the movies, I think it's the Khan one, the newer ones with Khan. And they're chasing this guy, Khan, through the city. And they keep teleporting people in to go chase after him, but they always teleport them in behind them as they're running. And I'm like, first of all, can't they just teleport him up into the ship and they capture him? Number one. Of course they can, but assume they can't do that. Why can't they just teleport the security team ahead of the guy who's running and they're right there to catch him? This kind of stuff is what happens in the Traveler game.
Okay.
We have things like this happen all the time.
I think we have teleporters in Traveler, but lay it out here. What are you talking about?
There are solutions for science fiction problems that are science fiction related within the rule set, but you don't use them or can't use them because as a GM, you need to have a scene. Example might be, we had this ship on the Byron. We have all these drones. We can send the drones in. Why are we even sending people in?
Yeah.
I mean, is it exciting to have drones in there? No, it's not. It's not. Could they do the job? Yes, they absolutely 100% could do the job.
For reference, people, this is like, hey, if you come across another alien ship in space where there's dangers in there, you don't need to go in there like actual science fiction, adventure, movie, literature type people. You can just send in, they had in this book, they had all kinds of drones that were capable of running around and doing all that stuff for you that are the size of a dog maybe.
So what are we doing to serve the story and to serve the module? We're putting on our gear and going into the ship when we really know that we could send drones in to do it.
Interesting.
Those are the kind of things that we saw multiple times during the course of Traveler. You have to kind of make those decisions as a table and decide that this is more cinematic.
I do think that one of the things about Traveler is that it has, broadly speaking, a similar kind of 70s sci-fi aesthetic that Star Wars had. I mean, that analogy we made at the beginning of the episode was apt.
Star Trek.
No, I'm saying Star Wars.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that, I don't think I've seen, I could be wrong about this. I haven't read every book, but I don't think I've seen the kind of super sophisticated internet, or there's no faster than light communication. That's actually one of the kind of core principles in Traveler. There's certain things that you kind of look at and you're like, well, this is in the same sense that Star Wars is kind of stuck in a 70s era technology where you still kind of have to go places and do things. You don't kind of operate remotely in the same way. there's all kinds of ways that the technology's advanced since the 70s, and a lot of the game is kind of built around, and frankly, a lot of sci-fi experiences are built around these older kinds of science fiction assumptions. So yeah, there's kind of these interesting limitations that you point out that are like, oh, you gotta kind of roll with it. That's kind of the nature of the tech in this space, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be very difficult from a campaign design point to cover all those types of possibilities. It's a lot easier in a fantasy game, like an old sword and sorcery game, because technology just changes how we approach problems. There's a lot more limitations in a fantasy game that can kind of keep you as a GM, you can kind of keep the players and everything controlled a little easier. Traveler's a different beast altogether, and you have to be really on your feet as a GM to run that game.
Here's what I'll say is I think a lot of that will depend on, to your point earlier, the extent to which you are a science fiction nerd.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of those STEM types that we talked about earlier, the people that are super into the science and the technology and the engineering, and who are going to obviously think about that kind of stuff in their spare time. They're going to have those kinds of problems figured out. I'll give you an example from the module we played, right? You remember there's this one part where there's radio frequency communication coming in from an alien, and they are giving it to us with a whole bunch of like scientific encryption around like wavelengths that have to do with like what's called the water hole, I guess. It's like this wavelength where moisture is. That indicates life, and that's supposed to indicate like, oh, there's intelligence here. And that's one of those things that like our science friend was like, oh, that's so cool. And
Yes.
we were like, I literally have no idea what that is. So I do think that you're definitely onto something. I think if you're kind of a standard D&D player, standard D&D group, and you hop into this game, like you're going to have to start really rethinking a lot of the basic assumptions around what kinds of problems you're going to find, how you solve them, what kinds of expectations you should have when you run around space or other planets or whatever.
It's also a game where if you have players at your table that are really smart about this kind of stuff, they can make your life very miserable if you're not smart. Like Sean, God bless you. Your brain is much, much bigger than mine. And I think you were keeping up with them well, Ben, I got to say, but like it's not an easy task.
Well, you guys, that is everything I think we could tell you about Traveler. I recommend it. I think it's fun, but I do think to the point of our conversation at several points here, you really do need to think through your science fiction assumptions and what kind of group you have and if they're going to like that too.
Yeah. Check in with your players. If they're really into that science fiction stuff, they might just love it. There's definitely a lot of people out there like that just gravitate to that kind of crunchy science fiction. And this is the game for them. Probably not for me.
All right. Good to know. I think I'll play it again. I'm going to be curious, Mark, if we can flex this into something that's a little bit more adventure-y than maybe some of the work we did in the earlier game. But
it's strange because my favorite show of all time is like on TV is The Expanse.
Yeah.
And so I definitely love science fiction. I always get wowed when I watch some of the good science fiction shows of how brilliant they act in certain situations. Like, oh, that's really cool, because that's probably just not me.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it. And I probably would enjoy it in certain game settings. I don't know if Traveler's the game, though.
Well, we definitely learned a lot. Again, I think I'll recommend it if you've got the right kind of group for it. And I think there's so much there to draw on that I think you can play a lot of different kinds of games and have a great time with it. So that's our review of Traveler. I don't think we're going to do a tune-up this week. We're running a little long, but we will look forward to bringing you more tabletop tune-up a couple weeks from now. Until then, keep those dice rolling.
Tune up, level up your fun. Tune up, your quest has now show you how it's done. Tune up, tune up, tune up, tune up, tune up. Level up your fun. Tune up. Your quest has now begun. Tune up. You'll show you how it's done. Tune up. Tune up. Tune Come get your tune up. It's time for your tune up. Your game needs a tune up. Come get your tune up.